Hi everyone, welcome back to Hazel's Flight School Liquor Edition. I'm Lily Margolis,
And I'm Maximilian Girardin.
and today we're talking about vermouth.
Yeah, this is going to be a really fun treat. So, in front of us we have Rockwell Vermouth. Rockwell is a fairly new player to the game in vermouth. It's created in California, and oftentimes people, when they're coming in and asking us about vermouth, it's because they were just in Spain or France or Italy and they drank vermouth there. There's a couple of American-made vermouths, but this guy out in California had an idea, had a dream, and he really produced something very special. So we're going to start out with the dry vermouth, and we're going to talk a little bit about the production process on vermouth because it's kind of confusing. It's a fortified wine. Have we done any fortified wines?
I know fortified wine is basically an alcohol added wine in a way.
That's exactly right. Yeah. So during the vermouth making process and the fortification process, you've got all of your yeast sitting in your sugary mess, whatever it is, and they're eating sugar and they're pooping out alcohol. In order to stop them from eating all that sugar, you can up the alcohol by volume by pitching in a brandy or a grain spirit, and that kills off all the yeast that are in there, leaving a fair amount of residual sugar. Now, that's how ports and sherries and all of those are made. Vermouth takes this to a couple of extra steps because the spirit that they're throwing in to stop that yeast from fermenting has been infused with botanicals. Now, in order to be labeled as a vermouth, it used to be kind of thought that it had to be wormwood, which is where the word vermouth comes from. However, the actual rule is that it has to be an artemisia. So any one of these leafy green plants that grow all over the US, all over the world. There's artemisia in Japan, there's artemisia in California, and this is a Californian one, particularly using California sage, which only grows along the coastline of the northern part of California. So this guy, when he was producing these vermouths, he wanted to use California terroir. And that was the whole idea with it, is California sage instead of the classic wormwood that you would find in a classic vermouth. On a dry vermouth, you would let the yeast eat almost all of the sugar before you would pitch it up to fortify it, which is why all three of these start as white wines, but then depending on how much sugar you let the yeast eat and when you pitch in the brandy to up the alcohol, that's when you get the difference between sweet and dry and Bianco and so on. So let's smell and try this. What do you think?
I mean, now that you say sage, that's all I can think about,
Right?
but you can tell.
Right?
You can tell it's in there.
Yeah, and I've always thought that sage has like a really lovely earthy, spicy tone to it. So yeah, this is my favorite lately for making dirty martinis in particular. And yeah, uniquely a California kind of terroir. The base grape for these is a kind of Frankenstein's monster, kind of a clone from the guys at UC Davis that were trying to produce a super aromatic grape. The grape is called Symphony. It is super aromatic. I don't think there are any wines out there that are made with 100% this varietal, but it makes a really killer vermouth.
Yeah, but this is not what I thought it was going to taste like.
Yeah.
It's really good.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, most wine people don't really get into vermouth until they spend a trip in Spain, and then they're drinking vermouth all day, and they come back here and they ask me, do you have this? Like, I love this stuff. But it's definitely much more for a wine head. Yeah. So, next we have the Rockwell Amber. There aren't very many other amber vermouths out there that I can think of. This is pretty much the only one that I've ever seen that has that designation. It's not a standard designation.
Yeah.
The idea with this one is that he's using an orange wine, so skin contact and that kind of production, and then a fair amount of barrel aging after fortification with the brandy. So you're going to have more oak, more mellow notes, and he was really trying to focus on citruses because this vermouth was made specifically to go with agave spirits, tequilas and mezcals. Many other vermouths are not made with that in mind. So being on the California coast, there's a lot more tequila there than there are in traditional vermouth producing regions. So let's check this one out, see if you can pull out some differences.
This to me, like on the nose, seems heavier, like on the orange peel, on the citrus, than the first one. You're still getting that like sage and herbal component, but I see why this was made to be used with tequila and mezcal. It's gonna be like a similar complement to your orange liqueur in a marg.
Yep, absolutely, yeah. And I would totally use this as a sub out for Cointreau or Grand Marnier and a margarita. It would add a little bit of a wine note to it, but that's not a bad thing at all. One of the questions that we often get asked in the store is, do I have to refrigerate this, or how long does it last? These are a fortified wine, so they last a lot longer than just a wine would at room temperature. Probably about 2 weeks if you weren't refrigerating it. If you refrigerate it, I think that gets up to 2 or 3 months. The key thing to bear in mind is that it doesn't go bad like wine will, because it's been fortified. There's not that much accessible sugar or anything for it to re-ferment. It's too high in alcohol to do that. What happens to it is it goes flat. All of these lovely aromatic components, all of these things that vermouth should do and really pop, just aren't as bright anymore and are all kind of muted in one note. So it won't be harmful. I think my mom had 1 bottle of Tribuno sweet vermouth in my fridge for like 10 years in my life, because she never knew what else to use it for. She had 1 recipe. Which brings me to the next thing. If you're struggling to get through your massive bottle of vermouth because you just don't drink it that often, you can use your vermouth for cooking. Any single time your recipe calls for a white wine, you could use a dry vermouth easily for it. It'll work really well, and it's less spoilable, so you don't have to finish that whole bottle of white wine after you've only used a portion of it for your sauce.
Final one.
We have Rockwell Sweet Vermouth. Now, this is one of the more confusing things about vermouth in general, because there's so many different words, right? Especially when we start getting to different countries. In France, they have rouge, and then blanc, and then dry or extra dry. And in Italy, they'll say rosso and bianco. And so those are all words for red and white. When you have a white vermouth, which we don't have here, although the amber would be closest in idea, it's the same idea as a dry vermouth, except you pitch in your brandy to fortify it while the yeast are still in there, while there's still a ton of residual sugar. So white wine base, sweeter kind of fortification level, but still not as dark and sweet as our sweet vermouth. Now, some sweet vermouths are indeed red wine bases, but almost 95% of the vermouth out there on the market is a white wine base that has been colored. They use a lot of caramel color, they might use some red wine for a blush, but for the most part, it is a white wine base that has been colored to have that red, rouge, rosso, as well as all the botanicals that the brandy has, which tend to be darker, things like cherries and walnuts and chocolate. So this is on the more dessert side. Do you know what cocktail would you make with sweet vermouth?
I have no idea.
It's like the most famous cocktail.
A Manhattan.
Manhattan, yeah, exactly. Manhattan is just a whiskey, usually a bourbon or a rye, traditionally a rye, and a sweet vermouth. And then you can really do anything you want from there. Everyone's got their own garnishes and all that kind of stuff and bitters. So this one is made to be much sweeter, which means that it was fortified a lot earlier than the dry vermouth is. And remember, I said all of those sweeter, more desserty tones are really supposed to come out in this.
And if this is a colored vermouth, so there's no barrel aging at any point in the process of making a vermouth.
Actually, some of them, absolutely. So the amber that we tried earlier does spend some time in a barrel. I believe that the sweet does as well. Sometimes a dry will, although generally barrel aging will soften things. Dry vermouth is really supposed to be about like big mineral white wine and botanical complexity and freshness, kind of, and barrel aging can really muddy that down. But yeah, I would I would hazard that almost all of the most famous vermouths have some barrel aging as a part of their production method. Yeah. But remember, it's not at a super high proof, so it's not going to be breaking down the barrel as much as it's going to be kind of resting, oxidizing, oxygenating with oak contact. Yeah. Oh, good question. Any particular notes on this one?
That's so good, first of all.
It's pretty cool, right?
Cinnamon a little bit.
Totally.
Maybe
Yeah.
some, like clove
Mhm.
as well, but you're still, I mean, you're getting that boost in sugar as well, so.
This one always tastes like root beer to me.
Oh.
It got like a sarsaparilla, allspice, cola-y kind of note.
Yeah, I see it.
But yeah, no, this is a really delicious one, just as a dessert shot even. So remember, keep your vermouths chilled, and once they're open, you're good for a couple of months. So drinking them on their own is the most surefire way to get through them before they go flat.
This on ice cream?
That on ice cream would be really, really good. Absolutely.
Another use.
Yeah. And it makes an excellent Negroni, which is gin and Campari and sweet vermouth. That was the basics of vermouth. Thank you very much to Rockwell Vermouth Company for making such an incredible addition to the whole set. And thank you to Jacob Noske from Classic Wines for supplying the samples.
Thanks for flying with us today. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and ask your questions in the comments.